Hi, this is Zachary Brown, and we're going to talk about the Guildford 4 case. Terrorists are a severe threat to the well-being of the general population, and in some cases, if a terrorist behind an attack is captured, it is argued that they should be tortured in order to get information about future attacks with the terrorist group. The problem with this lies in its probability of producing a false admission of guilt after torture or extreme interrogation. Great Britain and the Irish Republican Army are broken up into Ireland, controlled by the IRA, and Northern Ireland, under British control. IRA wants Joint Republic of Ireland, and the IRA has resorted to terrorist attacks on Northern Ireland and has moved its way to England in hope to get Britain's attention and get their way. On October 5th, 1974, the IRA bombed 2 pubs in Guildford, England that were targeted because of their popularity with the British military. 5 people were killed, and 4 of them were members of the British military. Several other bombings occurred between then and November 21st, 1974. Which was when the IRA bombed 2 more pubs in Birmingham, England. This resulted in 21 people dead and 161 people injured. Because of this, fear and panic ensued all over Britain, and this fear turned into panic and anger and defensive rage. Behaviors and opinions toward Irish members living in Britain were judgmental and hostile. These feelings brought with them legislation, and on November 29, 1974, the Prevention of Terrorist Act set forth regulations to try to stop the attacks. The act made membership and support of the IRA an illegal offense, and police were given the power to arrest without warrant anyone who could be reasonably suspected of terrorism, even without any evidence of the offense. The first person subjected to this arrest is an Irishman, Paul Hill, who's taken in and questioned. He was beaten, held at gunpoint, and threatened for over 24 hours until he produced a written confession to the bombings. In his explanation, he identified a friend, Gary Conlon. After getting the name, police arrested and interrogated Conlon in a similar fashion. Conlon implicated friends who supposedly were IRA members or were related to the terrorist attacks as well, Patty Armstrong and Carol Richardson. Both were arrested and interrogated until they also gave confessions. So now Hill, Conlon, Armstrong, and Richardson have all admitted to their involvement in the IRA bombings only after intense and questionable interrogation. They were tried in September of 1975, and the prosecutor alleged the four's allegiance to the IRA, even when no such evidence of that existed, and the only evidence against each of them was their own confessions. The idea of the defense was to challenge the use and the reliability of their own confessions. None of them were given access to an attorney during the questioning, and all had alibi evidence for the time of the bombings. Despite all of this and the inconsistencies, the lack of physical evidence, the 4 were convicted and sentenced to varying life sentences. Not long into these sentences, a group of real IRA members are arrested on unrelated charges, and not only admit to bombings in England, but also said that the 4 had nothing to do with the bombings, and that they're not members of the IRA. Despite this new information, the court and convictions are still upheld. Now, until 14 years later in 1986. In 1986, forensic psychologist expert Dr. Godwinson and Dr. McKeith decide that they're going to help with the defense's appeal. The doctors think that it's something called memory distrust syndrome, which is described as little faith in personal memory because of an outside pressure to remember something like police coercion during the interrogation. The doctors believe the false confessions were directly related to the combined pressure and feeling of duress in a situation of questioning. In 1988, the case is reopened for review with this as defense. All 4 were found to have falsely confessed to the bombings, and in 1989, an appeals court ruled the members of the police force had fabricated and lied about the evidence. Results after almost 20 years of the wrongful miscarriage of justice, the convictions are overturned, and the 4 were eventually compensated monetarily for the mistakes and the suffering. Starting with the prosecution, you can't go after what you can't, what's not there. Starting with the Prevention of the Terrorism Act, criminal justice system failed in this situation. Giving police more power to detain or arrest without reasonable evidence should not have been implemented without checks and balances of some kind. This means that someone should investigate the investigation going on, especially when the interrogation tactics that are being used produce confessions when there is no physical evidence for these things. My other problem comes from after their sentence and the real perpetrators of the crime are discovered, and they're not exonerated. That just didn't make any sense to me. It should definitely not have been that way. In this case, no other evidence besides their confessions existed and had tied them to the bombings. Confession evidence based on this case is not reliable unless questioning and interrogation is done properly by the police, and coercive tactics can be identified and eliminated if interrogations are video recorded and further reviewed by other police members.